Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union, Operation Barbarossa, an act seen by many as one of history's greatest blunders and military follies, one which many of Germany's generals advised against, though Hitler still pursued. But why? When such a thing as a two-front war has historically proven disastrous for Germany, and was evident enough for both Britain and the Soviets, to the point that neither thought Germany would be crazy enough to do it, you've gotta wonder, again, why? And what might have happened had Operation Barbarossa never been launched? Hello audience? Hey Europe, Mr. Z here, and in case you didn't know, I've been banned in the EU.
But Mr. Z, I can see your videos in England. You're not banned, you Yankee wanker.
Well, that might be the case for recent uploads, but for anyone who wants to check out videos I've made prior to September of this year, you'll find them either non-existent or unviewable. The bulk of my content, from what if Russia won the Russo-Japanese War, to my video on the Franco-British Union, completely inaccessible to numerous countries. Over a year's worth of videos have simply been blacklisted, while viewership from former staples of our community, from Britain to Germany, have dropped by over half. Meaning not only are old videos being hidden, but new videos are being suppressed. That's why I've brought for all of you, especially our European brothers out there facing the censorship of big tech and the EU's Article 13, a special offer from NordVPN, a virtual private network service capable of bypassing even the censorious Great Firewall of China. If you follow our exclusive link in the description and use the coupon code Monsieur, you'll receive an additional free month of online privacy at the low price of only $2.99 per month. And if you try it and don't like it, there's a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee.
Well, that fixes all the problems, doesn't it?
Considering the increasing regulation, scrutiny, and censorship we're now facing across the internet, a VPN is becoming an increasingly essential tool for everyone who values anonymity and online freedom. It's no solution, but for now, it'll get the job done. So go on and check out the special offer from NordVPN. Every download helps support this channel in more ways than one. Now, back to the video. Operation Barbarossa. Why the hell was this launched? There's a good lot of theories, but the most prominent and often touted is the simple belief that the Russian army was weak, and would be a campaign no different than France or Poland for Germany. The Germans feared a British alliance with the Soviets that would lead them to become more capable and dangerous, thus moving them to launch a preemptive strike before the Soviets could ally with the Brits. Russia was seeing a rather poor military history after all, from the Russo-Japanese War to the Winter War and Polish-Soviet War. Russia simply wasn't all that competent, it would seem. My issue with this theory is that in such a timeline, regardless of Russia's capabilities, two outcomes are possible. Either you don't launch an invasion, and Britain might, I stress might, bring the USSR into the war, or you launch the invasion, and surely bring the USSR into the war. I understand that blitzkrieg tactics, the element of surprise, might be enough to win the war quickly and leave Britain's support ineffective, but realistically speaking, it was clear enough to the German generals and basically everyone else at the time that it was a bad idea. There's also the oil argument, that the Reich was low on oil and needed some from the USSR's land to support the war, but Britain happened to also be running fairly low on resources as well. But does opening a new front which will ultimately expend more resources sound reasonable? I don't think so, especially not when negotiations with the USSR were still possible for Germany to exploit. Maybe it was because Eastern Europe was Germany's goal all along, indeed, but is this a goal of immediate urgency, one that must be pursued at risk of losing a war that you at the very least have a chance of winning and at best would leave you the dominant Western European nation with enough fresh resources and manpower to fulfill your initial goal once you recuperated from a war with Europe's top dog? Look, it's difficult to say exactly what motivated the launch of Operation Barbarossa with utmost certainty, as the subject is continually debated even today. It could be a matter of numerous circumstances that just happened to come together to create a perfect storm of terrible. For whatever darn reason, let's just suggest that Barbarossa is simply never launched. Britain and Germany keep duking it out, and both have plans to topple the other. Britain had planned a total naval blockade of Europe to sap any resources coming to Germany. This would be paired with attacks on German crops to ultimately starve them out. Germany had an identical plan in which they would capture by land the Suez Canal, potentially with support from either Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Palestine, or even the Lehi. Hell, a good bulk of the Middle East could have been drawn upon from the pro-German Persian government under Reza Shah, who Britain in our timeline overthrew with aid from the USSR, to the disgruntled populations of Palestine under British rule, which saw their land ceded to Israel in the post-war years, and knew such a thing would be coming because of the Balfour Declaration. These moves to capture the Suez Canal would also be supplemented with a later securing of Gibraltar, with support from Spain under fascist Francisco Franco, while bombing runs would be done to cripple British food production and also starve them out. This was generally the plan, as both Britain and Germany believed their opponent would be militarily capable for the foreseeable future, and that the only means of victory would be to strike at their resources. If we assume that both sides draw upon every resource and ally they could without bringing the Soviets into the fight, we could see Germany develop a military alliance with Spain, Turkey, the Leahy, and Sweden. The extent of these alliances would likely be to allow the establishment and stationing of German fortifications in these regions with minimal conscription of those sympathetic to the war effort. In return, Spain would likely desire the concession of Gibraltar and Morocco, Turkey the recreation of the Ottoman Empire with British portions of the Middle East, and Sweden, under the direction of sympathizer Erich von Rosen, might seek something akin to a unified Scandinavia freed from the threat of the USSR. The Leahy, or Lahai, would be the only exception, that they would be directly combating and weakening British forces through use of terror tactics and propaganda, their goal being to carve out an Israel out of British Palestine, one which Germany could then expel the Jews to, while giving them a functioning population once the state was established. Protection pacts could also be formed with Iran and Nationalist China to protect their lands from Britain and the USSR in exchange for a supply of resources. This could bring Nationalist China to the negotiation table if they feared collapse at the hands of either Japan or the Communists. If we really want to push the resource war, we could also have German and Japanese forces promote rebellion within India, with the support of independence activist Subhas Chandra Bose, the Malcolm X to Gandhi's MLK. On the British side, they could very well continue purchasing weapons and resources from the US via the Lend-Lease Act, but on the grand scale, there isn't too much Britain could do short of the US joining the war following the attack on Pearl Harbor. A stretch possibility could be the drawing in of Portugal onto the side of Britain, and in tandem motivating Brazil to offer support in the war. What's the final verdict? In the case that both sides pull out all possible options, it would seem that Germany has the greater potential to outlast Britain, costing them colonial holdings across Africa to be occupied by both Germany and Italy, Middle Eastern land to be occupied by the Ottomans, and New Leahy state, as well as portions of India annexed into Persia. Portugal, for its role in the war, could lose territory to Spain, while China found itself partitioned into Manchukuo, Nationalist Han China, and a unitary Indochina. France would find itself reunited under the rule of Philippe the Dawn, while Scandinavia saw unification under von Rosen. Britain, following the tremendous stress of the war, may face insurrection and see the reinstallation of pro-German King Edward VIII with Oswald Mosley as his prime minister, the two seeking to repair the war-torn nation and reassure control over remaining colonies, as India grew ever rebellious and finds itself, like China, shifting between nationalist and communist parties. Things seem to have ended up pretty nicely for Germany, it would seem, but looks can be deceiving. Germany, just as the great powers in the wake of World War I, would be exhausted and in dire need of replenishment, both to its ranks and in resources. Luckily, it now had a bounty of proxy states to draw upon, but each of whom relied heavily upon Germany as well during the war, and were in need of their own time to recuperate. But this plan wouldn't be in the cards. With Britain defeated and Germany exhausted, Western Europe, while now under German hegemony, was in a fragile state. The Soviet Union, fearful that they would become the next course in Germany's meal once Britain was eliminated, had been preparing ever since for an offensive campaign against Europe. As the great powers duked it out, the USSR continued industrializing and remilitarizing, fortifying their western border, and training soldiers to fight in the terrains of the West, knowing that the Anglo-German War offered the best opportunity to make ripe the West for Sovietization by cracking its hardened shell enough that the Red Army may push forward and ultimately shatter it. In March of 1945, soon after conflicts between Britain and Germany had ceased, the USSR would begin its advance into Western Europe by invading Romania, Bulgaria, Finland, and Hungary. Whilst communist uprisings erupted within northern China and India, the US by this point would still be engaged in combat with Japan, island hopping and allying to nationalist China to put the final squeeze on the Japanese Empire as American and Soviet forces both raced to capture the Japanese islands. All the while, the Soviets would be met with a wall of German resistance along their own and Scandinavian border, securing their homes from invasion, but the Soviets would not be deterred from their advance and instead route their push through Italy, while the Middle East fell under their occupation. Germany and Britain, in their quest for dominance, found that they had crippled each other enough for a truer, more dangerous foe to amass the strength necessary to potentially eradicate them both. Now Britain and Germany found themselves upon the same side, united against a common enemy, but one they could not fight alone. Their fate now rested in the hands of the United States, a nation Germanic in population and British in history, It seemed only appropriate that it succeed them as the new superpower to combat their ultimate and eternal enemy. I'd like to thank NordVPN for sponsoring today's video and helping give our European viewers the opportunity to watch our content that would otherwise be forbidden to them. Once again, if you'd like to take advantage of this special offer, the link is in the description. Just be sure to use our coupon code Monsieur. And with that said, the US of Z thanks you for watching. Support your Legion by liking the video or join our ranks by subscribing for more. Mr. Z, out.